Yo, what's up everybody? In this video, I'm just going to quickly go over all of the balance changes that happened in the last patch. I kind of covered it live, but I just gave a really raw take on just the changes as they happened, but I was too overwhelmed with the new cards, the collector's tokens, and the token shop. Like, this was one of the best patches we have seen in Marvel Snap's history. But it's also one of the smallest in terms of balance changes. We only had technically 5 changes, and 4 were only the difference of 1 power on each card. Now, in this video, I'm going to go into more detail about these changes. Is it going to actually change these cards from a meta perspective? Are we still going to see them? Are they dead cards? What happened to these cards? Okay, so Destroyer. So I was anticipating something happening to this deck. The Destroyer ongoing deck that we're seeing a lot lately. And unfortunately, I don't think that's going to change. We're still going to see this deck quite a bit because the difference that they made was Destroyer has been reduced by 1 power. He went from 16 to 15. Now, there's a little bit more on the surface than just, kind of saying that that wasn't much. That wasn't enough. Because the Destroyer's power output is heavily reliant on winning the game. Like when you play the Destroyer, you might have a Colossus at that location. You might have a Cosmo, which means at this point, you're going to be up to 18 power if you have one of those. Maybe you even have both. I don't know. Okay. But you're probably going to be around 18 power, maybe 20, 21, whatever. But that's what you're relying on to win the game. If your opponent can just find a different way to beat that power output across a couple lanes or predict which lane you're going to play the Destroyer at, then they're going to beat you. Now, that 1 power could make a difference to give your opponent the edge to beat them. And that's kind of what they said in the developer's notes. But I just don't really see it happening. I think this deck is still very good, and it's easy for new players to build because it only really takes the Destroyer. He's the only Series 3 card that you require to build that deck. So all in all, I think it's kind of a fair nerf. Honestly, as annoyed as I am by seeing this deck, it's not the Destroyer. The Destroyer doesn't bum me out. Like, I get his effect. It's his synergistic cards. It's his supporting cards, and none of those were touched. I'm talking Cosmo, Armor, Professor X, these cards that keep your other cards protected from his destroy mechanic while also pretty much outright winning you a lane. So those are the frustrating ones for me. Actually, more as I play against this deck, I find Cosmo to be one of the bigger issues, just in general, because there's so many on-reveal cards in Marvel Snap. Cosmo almost always gets value shutting down a lane and then also benefiting this deck. So I don't know. I don't know exactly how I would have went about changing it. I don't think this is enough. We might see a future nerf to this deck. But for now, we got the Destroyer nerf. And overall, I don't think this is going to impact the card or the meta. It's all going to stay the same. All right, let's talk about one that I actually do think changed a little bit here. Now, I have to preface by saying I don't think any of these cards have actually changed much or enough to swing the meta. It's not like a few patches in the past where we've had wild swings. I don't think we're going to see that, but there's 2 cards in particular that I think have had either a positive or negative change, and I'll get into that in a second. But in terms of Mysterio, he is a Series 3 card, and I do think this is a genuine nerf. It's not like Mysterio really heavily relied on that 5 power. It was a nice boost, and often would probably win you a game. Is that 1 power difference going to make a huge shocking difference? I don't know. I don't know if it is. Like they said in the developers' comments, one of the benefits to Mysterio is the 3 cards that are played. The illusions seem like they're taking up spots, but really the illusions are a benefit in a lot of scenarios. Let's take the destroy package, right? With Carnage, you want to destroy things and then discount death. Well, when you put the illusions out there, it gives Carnage something to eat, so another +2 power. You're not worried about destroying it because it never had power in the first place. And you discount your death further. Not to mention, if you're running Nova in that same deck and you destroy Nova, it's going to give the +1 power to the illusions, which will actually carry through to the end of the game. The illusions maintain their power increases or decreases. So you can actually buff those and it'll add to that location. So it can be really worthwhile. So I don't think he's going anywhere. We're going to see him in a lot of decks, played with Bishop, Angela. These are really good combinations. But I do think it's going to feel a little bit worse, and it might be worth swapping him out occasionally. 1 power is a big difference in Marvel Snap. It actually can make a big difference. It's probably the smallest possible move that we can make in terms of a buff or a nerf, but it is pretty big when you only have 5 to begin with and you lost 20%. All in all, I think this might be the biggest change in the patch in terms of actually affecting a card's viability. But let's get into one that might be a buff. All right, so obviously on the surface level, this is a nerf. And if you're in Series 1 or 2, this is a nerf. because Angela just lost 1 power. But that doesn't really matter. The purpose of the card is to play cards at that location and get +6 power if possible, right? Because you play 3, she's there, and then you get 2, 4, 6. And then before it used to be a 2-7, which is crazy value. Now it's a 2-6, which is still crazy value. And then maybe you can play Nightcrawler there, move Nightcrawler off, and then play another thing there, and then you get her to +8 or 9 in the past. You know, like the value is still through the charts. And the reason you're playing Angela hasn't changed because of this one base level power change. But here's the kicker, and everybody loves to remind me of this, and now I'll never forget, is anytime you reduce the power of a card, especially one with little power to begin with, it becomes a buff in negative decks. So Mr. Negative is a card that on reveal swaps the cost and power of all cards in your deck. So now Angela would come out of your deck as a 0 cost 2 power to start, and then you can keep buffing her with all those other probable negatized cards that you're drawing, and it's going to be crazy. We've already seen some pretty wild plays with Sera negative decks. That used to be one of the best decks in the meta. I could see this card being thrown back in there if it wasn't already in there, and really dominating the meta once again. So it's hard to say that this is a nerf despite it being a blatant nerf. It should be a nerf. Now, that is a Series 3 card, so, you know, like a lot of people in Series 1 and 2 are going to be hurt by this, and that kind of bumps me out because this was a carry card for those decks. It was probably one of the best cards in the game, and it still is like in the top 10. But something did have to be done. I think, honestly, a better route in my mind would have been like keep her at 1 power, maybe even put her to 2 power, but make it so that every time you play a card there, it only gives +1 power. That's something similar they did to the Collector. Now, I know some people might be really upset about that idea, and that's fair. I like Angela the way she was, but she was one of the better cards, so we had to change something, and I don't think this was the best course of action because watch, these negative decks are going to start flooding the meta. But that's just an interesting thing about, you know, negative. Like, I think it's becoming one of my most hated cards because of how much it constrains the design space in Marvel Snap. You can't have 0 power cards with weird effects because you just think, well, you know, the offset is not having power, so it has a positive effect, but then negative flips it, and then all of a sudden it's just a good and a good. It's too good. It's too good. It's too good. Negative is a bit of a problem in Marvel Snap. So anyways, that's a conversation for another day. But I think Angela's just going to do fine. We're not going to see any reduction in her play rate. And she might even get a little bit better. All right, and then we got Onslaught. So this is probably the least worth talking about change, I think, because it's just Onslaught, the same old Onslaught as you knew him. And if you didn't already know, his ability was exponential. Now, I can't really do the math on the fly for you guys. I've had to have people help me out with the math, but there used to be some crazy combos, and basically you could trigger an effect about 256 times. I don't know what the new one is, but it's additive. So I assume it's a lot less, but still game winning. So even if you pull off that combo, you already probably won the game no matter what the heck you did. Now you probably still win the game, but it's going to be a lot quicker for the animations to resolve, so your opponent isn't just like hating their life, deleting the game from their app store, whatever, you know, like it was a bit of a problem. It was cool to see. Binks did like some crazy Exodia combos. I watched his stream and it was super fun, all the different combinations. But he did break the game frequently with like Quake. So like, I don't know, maybe it's worth it to make this change. It might in some scenario, I'm sure you guys will know better than me, actually impact the game and make a big swing. Like you don't get quite enough power from like an Ironheart buff or whatever. But overall, I think that situation was few and far between, and this is a negligible change that we're not really going to ever talk about ever again. So it's fine the way it is. Math is hard, less math, additive, 1 + 1. I'm here for it. Alrighty, and lastly, but certainly not least, is Sera. And I think a lot of people would agree in saying that Sera is the best card in the game. Possibly top 3, I think, would be a pretty easy argument to make. And they reduced her power by 1. Now, there's been a lot of back and forth about possible nerfs, and I think everyone kind of knew something was coming. And it is a difficult card to nerf. I've seen a lot of people say you can't really change the effect, because you can't make, well, let's start here. You can't make her a 6 cost because that makes no sense. You're discounting your hand, then you have to cheat her out early or something. No, you can't do that. You can't really change her effect that much because the whole value is that the last turn that you have cards cost 1 less. I suggested maybe making a minimum of 2. Nobody liked that, so that's fair. That's fair. I see how that would probably ruin the card and its effect, but she is a problem, right? Cost reduction is always a problem. And then those big turn 6 bursts, they're a problem for a number of reasons. One, like cubes matter, and on the last turn you probably roped your opponent into a few extra cubes, and if they stick it through the last turn hoping that your Sera play wasn't enough, well, you might be in for some extra bonus cubes, which kind of sucks. It feels bad because you played your good card but your opponent played like 5 because Sera discounted their hand. Touchy subject. I don't know what to do, but 1 power is not going to change this card. You're going to see a lot of Sera. If anything, like what I was talking about with Angela earlier, Serotonin, which was the Sera negative deck, just got a little bit better because now your Sera's only going to cost 4. If you can play negative early somehow and then get Sera out there, holy smokes, you're going to have like the easiest time playing all those negative cards, and it's just going to be wild. So it gets even a little bit better in that deck. And then everything else, do they really care about the 1 power? Like, I'm sure there will be the odd game. I think I saw something on Twitter where somebody actually won because Sera didn't have that 1 power. Their opponent played it, didn't have that 1 bonus power. Sure, of course that's going to happen. Like anything that's going to happen. But I think for the most part, very minimal impact in any of her deck lists. You use Sera for the effect, not really her power total. It was just the cherry on the top. Honestly, I think they could go much lower in her power and you'd still see her as a viable option because the cost reduction is insane. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw another balance tweak with the new season. I feel like this was just a little bit to give a change with the collector tokens in the token shop. Usually they do something bigger at the end of the month, so I wouldn't be surprised if next week we get some more changes, and I'll definitely keep you guys updated on the channel. But that's it. I just wanted to go over these really quickly and comment below your thoughts, how you feel about these changes, if you would have done something different or if you want to see a different card change. Let me know. I'm really curious to see what you guys are thinking or how you're feeling about the current meta. So anyways, thank you for watching as always, and I will catch you guys next time.